Hello, everyone. This is Jonny of Classic Viscount Organs here with the one and only Lou Pomanti, a composer, producer, and musician who has worked with several famous names, including Matt Dusk, Mark Jordan, and also Michael Bublé. So, to kick things off, for those who may not know you, tell us a little bit more about yourself, who you are, what you do, why do you do it, and yeah.
Well, I'm a Toronto-born musician. I still live in Toronto. I've lived in Toronto for my entire life. My career has gone through many phases. I've been around for a while now, been playing in the Toronto area for almost 50 years. So I started off as just a keyboard player in the 70s and played with a bunch of bands. And I got my first break out of the bar scene when Patsy Gallant, who was then a very big disco star, asked me to join her band when I was 20. And then 2 years later, in 1980, I got a call from David Clayton Thomas from Venezuela, asking me to join Blood, Sweat, and Tears. I was 22 at the time, and kind of changed my life. And I proceeded to tour the world with Blood, Sweat, and Tears for the next 2 years. And I continued to work with David Clayton Thomas, including producing a couple of his albums and playing on a bunch of his albums over the past 10 or 20 years or so as well. And then everything changed again in 1983 when I started getting calls to play sessions in Toronto, everything from jingles to records to TV shows. And that lasted a very long time, probably 15 years. And I basically didn't play live for 10 to 15 years because I was just so busy in the studio. I came up in the studio as a synthesizer player. And then from there, I moved on into what is my 15 years as a composer and scorer for television and movies. And I did that for 15 years. And it seems I go in 15-year cycles. And that brings me up to my current model, which is I'm a combination of all things now. I no longer score TV and film. I basically make records and play live and do whatever projects appeal to me.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Now, you
I mean,
mentioned,
there's
oh,
there's
sorry.
there's lots in the middle too,
Mhm.
but we'll get to that later, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And before we get to some of the main questions, something piqued my interest there. You said you worked with soundtracks. I don't recall when I was doing research, like which soundtracks that you did. So would you care to share which soundtracks you worked on?
It's as a player, I played on all kinds of famous movies. When back in the 80s, when the tax breaks were working great, a whole bunch of LA composers came up to Toronto to record scores for their films, and stuff like Moonstruck and Agnes of God and a whole bunch of that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And as far as my scoring goes, it's more TV than film, and just a lot of stuff for Discovery International. And I scored the Ron James Show for 5 years, and just a lot of stuff.
Nice, nice, awesome. All right, now with with the next question, I want to ask you, what got you into the drawbar organ originally?
Well, here's the deal. When I joined Blood, Sweat, and Tears when I was 22 years old, I didn't get a rehearsal. They called me one day in 1980 and said, "Can you meet us in Portland in 5 days?" I said, "Yes." So I quickly learned all their famous songs. I show up on the gig and they literally shoved a B3 in front of me, a Hammond B3, and said, "Go." Now, my only exposure to organ at that point had been two things. It had been when I went to Humber College, they taught us how to turn it on and shut it off. And then I was in a soul band for maybe 6 months, and they had a B3, and I played it in soul bands. So I wasn't that familiar with organ. I considered myself a piano player, and my rig at that time was a Fender Rhodes piano, Hohner clavinet, and a mini Moog on top, and they were stacked one, two, three. Kind of a dream rig back in those days.
Wow.
But when I joined BS&T, they shoved the grand piano and a Hammond B3 in addition to my setup. And so I kind of learned on the job. It was a bit of trial by fire.
Wow. Nice. That's cool. So, for the next question, what are some of your favorite songs that you've been playing on the Hammond B3 and instruments like that before?
I had a house gig at a club, a very iconic club in Toronto called the Orbit Room. And we opened that club in November of 1994. And my band, the Dexters, was the house band there for 10 years. And there was my Hammond B3 went in the day we opened. And the owner, Tim, had asked me to put together a Booker T and the MG style group. And the club was, and the band too, was instantly a hit. And so I learned a lot of the famous organ songs of that era, which was 60s and 70s. So Green Onions, of course, was we always ended the first set with Green Onions, and people went crazy. Soul songs, lots of soul songs. We played Time Is Tight by Booker T and the MGs. My God, I think I played Down by the Riverside, great organ song. We played The Preacher. We played The Cat by Jimmy Smith. We played What You See Is What You Get by the Dramatics, that great Philly soul song. We did a lot of organ classics.
Nice. That's cool. All right, now for the next one. Which drawbar organists have inspired you over the years, if any?
Oh, no, there have been a lot. I mean, of the old guys, of the originators, I know that Jimmy Smith was the innovator. I do know that. And I love Jimmy Smith's playing. But of the old guys, Jimmy McGriff was definitely my favorite. I don't know what it was. Maybe a little bit more, I don't know, groove oriented, maybe a little bit more soul music in Jimmy's approach. But the guy who I felt was the greatest in my era was, of course, Joey DeFrancesco. And I got to know Joey. I got to know him. I don't know if your listeners know this, but Joey married a girl from Mississauga.
Oh, wow. Oh,
So,
I've heard of her. I believe I followed her on Instagram. Yeah, I think.
So they had a condo in Mississauga as one of their homes. I think Joey's main home was always in Scottsdale, Arizona. But he did have one here. So he played Hughes' Room. Joey played the Orbit Room twice. So I mean, I'm like 4 feet away from Joey as he's playing my organ at the Orbit Room. So we kind of got friendly and we got chummy. And for me to be able to become friends with the greatest living Hammond B3 organ player was like a dream come true. Unfortunately, he passed a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. And it was really sad to hear of his passing, and even Viscount, the company that he collaborated with. They were also very sad to hear the news, and it was very sad to hear. But
he was the greatest. He was the greatest living drawbar organ player. He was.
Yeah. Indeed. And it's good to know that his legacy will live on, especially with the Legend Soul series of organs that have been released by Viscount in collaboration with them. That's one of the ways his legacy will live on for sure.
And there's one more player too.
Yes.
Of the slightly more rock oriented organ players. We had the good fortune of having Brian Auger play at the Orbit Room on 3 separate occasions. And for your listeners who don't know who Brian Auger is, Brian Auger was instrumental in the 60s and the 70s in the London, England rock scene. He had a band called Brian Auger and the Trinity. But I mean, he played with absolutely everybody. And he was just probably for my money anyways, the best rock organ soloist ever. I mean, all of the other guys we're talking about are much more jazz oriented, right? And I mean, Brian could play jazz, but his thing was like fusion music and rock and fusion. And he would always bring his synth keyboard and put it on top of the Hammond, and he'd comp on the Rhodes with his left hand and play the organ solos on his right hand. And it was his signature sound, but his solos were so exciting. He built them to such a climax. It was amazing. Never used fast Leslie, just that clear kind of slightly overdriven Hammond sound. It was great.
Yep. So, for the next question, is there anything else you love doing besides drawbar organ playing?
You mean as far as music goes?
Well, music and anything in general. Maybe you could start with music or in general. I don't know.
Well, look, I'm a record producer,
Mhm.
and I would say I'm an arranger, a record producer, and a keyboard player. So one of the most interesting things that's happened, like first of all, about 20 years ago, I really got interested in orchestration. And orchestration is one of those things it's a deep, deep, deep well. In fact, it's a bottomless well. So the more that you learn about orchestration, the more you realize that you don't know. So I spent a lot of time studying orchestration, and I'm probably best known for my orchestrations. For example, the 8 tracks I did on 2 different Michael Bublé albums. I orchestrated the strings and horns on Michael's biggest hit, Haven't Met You Yet, as well as 7 other tracks. So that's what I'm mostly known for. But the latest thing that's really tweaked my interest is mixing. I always thought that, I grew up in an era where you'd go into a recording studio and there would be the enormous Neve console or the SSL console, and there would be the engineer and he would have 2 assistants. And it's like, it was known that under no circumstances should a musician ever touch the board. It's like, no, you guys, this is over your heads. Don't be touching the console. Leave it to us. Because only 15 years earlier than that, recording engineers wore white lab coats. I mean, it was such a technical thing, right? So now the democratization of recording and mixing with everything being in the box in computers has been fantastic, and I absolutely love it. So I no longer have to deal with a middleman trying to describe to him musically how I want this music to sound. Now I record it, I mix as I go, and I make the music sound the way I hear it in my head. And that's been really, really fun. And I think that any technical expertise I may lack, and I'm saying this to musicians because a lot of musicians are afraid of mixing because we've been taught to be afraid of mixing. But it's like whatever technical expertise you might lack, I'm going to make up for it with my almost 50 years of musical experience. And believe me, there's going to be very few mix engineers out there that have the musical experience that I have, or for that matter, that they would know what I want the music to actually sound like. I mean, you can use references and you can do everything that you can, but I've had great success in mixing my own stuff. So that's been interesting.
That's cool to know. Wow. Yeah, it is really interesting to know that yeah, how far you can go when you actually, learn certain things that you could actually do a lot better than what for example, audio mixers would do, because you happen to understand the instruments themselves and know how they want to sound. Would that be right?
That's right. And especially as an arranger, I mean, part of an arranger's job is knowing where all the instruments lie in the frequency spectrum. Right from the contrabasses down here up to piccolos up here. And everything in between, and everything has its spot. So if you're doing an orchestration, you've got to understand the frequency spectrum that the woodwinds occupy. What does the low brass occupy? What does the high brass occupy? So that's almost like an introduction to mixing.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. For the next question, have you toured anywhere worldwide, or have you only performed locally, whether city, provincial, or national?
Well, when I joined Blood, Sweat, and Tears in 1980, we went around the globe twice. So I joined them in Portland. We went straight to Hawaii. We went to South Africa for a month. We went to Australia for a month. We went to Singapore. We went to play in Mexico City. We played all through America. So that was my most extensive touring. Then from 92 to 94, I toured with Kim Mitchell. And that was all Canada, with the exception of like Buffalo and Seattle. But that was a couple of years of going back and forth across Canada with Kim, whose music I love. But the rest of it has been more like I'm the Toronto guy. I'm the guy who's in Toronto and that people call and they know I'm here. And plus, I started having kids in the 90s. So right after the Kim Mitchell tour. So once kids come into the picture, touring is really nothing but a drag, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that part's understood for sure. Next one. Some time ago, you purchased a Viscount Legend Live from us. What was it about the Viscount brand that stood out to you and led to your decision to go for a Legend Live?
I had needed a clone wheel for some time. So a number of years ago, I think it was 2014, I bought, I'm not sure if I should say the model, the maker, but let's just say I bought a different clone wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't very happy with it. The sound, it felt like it was kind of built kind of cheaply and it was a little bit flimsy.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned on in such a way that I was always worried that it wasn't going to turn on. And so I started investigating all kinds of things. I tried the Hammond XK series, and I tried the Mojo, and I tried the Mag, and it came down to two for me. It came down to two. It came to either the Legend Live or the Mag, and I opted for the Legend Live because of Joey.
Oh, wow.
Because I heard Joey play it at NAMM, and I heard all the YouTube videos, and he sounded amazing. And I basically thought, Jesus, if it's good enough for Joey, it's good enough for me. So I went up to your place and I played it. And I wanted the Legend Live, not the full-size Legend, because I don't need the presets, because the 4 sets of drawbars are great. It's fine. It's live, and I've got a couple of presets off to the left. Plus, you know, I'm getting a little bit older. It's got to be light. It's got to be smaller. So it was Joey that brought me to the Legend Live, and then when I actually played it, it felt like butter. Like it really did. Yeah, it felt like butter. It felt really great. So I got to tell you, when I play with my band Oakland Stroke, which is a Tower Power tribute band, a 10-piece band with 5 horns, and all you Tower Power fans out there will know that Chester Thompson was the organist in the golden era of Tower Power, and he's one of the all-time greats of the organ. When it comes to funk organ and soul organ, Chester Thompson, hands down, you know, just the best. So when I do gigs now with Oakland Stroke and they have a real Hammond at the show, I don't use it for a number of reasons. My sound man likes it better when I use my Legend because of the direct outs, and he doesn't have to mic a Leslie and get all the ambient sounds and all that stuff. And to tell you the truth, you never know what you're going to get. As you know, all Hammonds are not created equal. I got asked to play the Niagara Jazz Festival event that's called Hungry for Hammond, I think. And even though it turned out that I couldn't do it, they had an A100 there, which is a good organ. But I warned her. I said, I'm not playing your Hammond. If I do your festival, I'm playing my Legend. And they weren't too happy, but I said, sorry, that's the way it is. And I'll tell you why. It's because as a keyboard player, my whole life since I was 15, you look at saxophone players, you look at guitar players, you look at bass players. Everybody has their own acts that they play. A guitar player doesn't have a different guitar at every show. A bass player doesn't have a different bass at every show. A sax player has his sax, that 50-year-old Selmer that he's been playing since he was 15. And I was always super envious of this stuff, especially in the organ department. You show up, some organs are great, some organs stink, they're old, keys don't work, the percussion doesn't work. They told me it was a B3, but it's a BV or a B2 right? All this that you just don't, that you can't count on, because these people don't know organs the way that we know organs, right? Oh, well, it's a Hammond. Wow. There are Hammonds and there are Hammonds. Like, if I remember once I showed up at a place, they told me that they had a B3 and it was an M1. And anybody who knows Hammonds, like, those are two different beasts. So part of the attraction of this was having my own instrument that I know how it sounds. I know how to work it. I know how to get the best out of it. It's the same reason why I recently bought a Nord Piano 5.
Interesting.
Because I tour with Mark Jordan, and his gig is a lot of grand piano. And we could only do gigs where there was a real grand piano. So when I bought my Piano 5, we booked a couple of gigs where there was no grand piano, and I used my Nord Piano 5, which I absolutely love. And our sound man, Tony Crea, said, Lou, you need to use that from now on. Even if there's a grand piano there, you need to use this. It sounds better out front. Because when you've got an acoustic instrument, or even electric and electroacoustic instrument like a Hammond, it's not just how the Hammond sounds. It's how loud the band is around you, how good the sound man is at miking it. It's a whole different thing. So I only mentioned the Nord because I bought both of these at the same time. And having the Legend as my instrument, I'm so much more confident going into a gig. I know what to expect. I know it's going to sound great. Yeah.
Wow. That is actually very interesting. Wow. I didn't, wow.
Well, that's the kind of thing that you only realize when you're out there in the trenches and have been doing it for as long as I've been doing it. I mean, it's like when I used to carry my Fender Rhodes with me in the 70s, except it weighs about five times as much. But this situation is much better because the Rhodes, it wasn't what I was really after. What I was really after was a piano sound, and of course, back then in those days, it just didn't exist, So
for sure, yeah, that is very interesting. How the Legend Live actually was very. It really did help you with your gigs and the such, which leads me to the next question.
Here, I'm going to show you something.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. Let's see. Oh wow, nice.
There's the setup.
Nice. Wow.
There's the Legend.
Nice.
Here, let's see.
Yeah, I can see it. Yes.
Yeah, there's the Legend. There's the Nord Piano 5, and that's where I prep for all my gigs.
Nice.
That is my setup.
Wow, that's great. All right.
And if the gig needs synths, I hire a young guy.
Oh, neat. Yeah. Okay, yes, which will lead me to the next question here. So I think you may have said something like this beforehand when I was asking you the previous question, but the next one I have here is, how have you been liking your Legend Live, and would you recommend it for other fellow session musicians?
Yeah, I definitely would. I've already recommended it to a bunch of people. First of all, if you're a real organ player, you can't really use a single manual, in my estimation. If you're going to play real organ parts, or if you're going to carry a band with your organ, you have to have dual manual. I think the Leslie Sim on the Legend is really, really good. I love the distortion and the overdrive on it, and I think the crosstalk actually sounds really good. I always use a little bit of crosstalk and a little bit of drive, always, because no real organ and real Leslie is going to sound perfectly clean. They just don't. The harmonic distortion is always there, and that's what makes it sound great, So I'm always, when I record it, and I use it on my records now, my Legend. Oh, I forgot to show you something.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, go ahead.
Here, watch.
Let's see.
Watch. Okay, so
yeah.
So here's the Legend, right?
Yes.
Look at what's behind it.
And isn't that a Hammond?
That's a Hammond. That's my Hammond B3.
Nice,
right?
Nice.
And it's a 1969.
Wow.
And it's fabulous and it sounds amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But when I do records now, I use my Legend lines.
Wow. Wow.
I do.
Nice.
Don't tell some of my clients. Hey Lou, can you put B3 on this? Yeah, sure. Except it's the Legend because, like I said, I can rely on it more. So it's not that I never use my real B, but mostly it's the Legend on my records.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So before we head off, I'd like to give Lou the opportunity to share his socials and any music projects that he's got working on. So what you got for us?
Well, this is a busy time, so I've got a lot of stuff for people that are interested. Um, I am MDing a fabulous show at Massey Hall on September the 28th. It's called Canada's Rock of Fame, and we're inducting 13 classic rock acts from the 70s and the 80s. So we're inducting Loverboy, April Wine, Lighthouse, Platinum Blonde, Prism, Trooper, Parachute Club, Chilliwack. List goes on and on and on. And we're going to have, I'm going to be playing with all those people at Massey Hall on the 28th. Also, I'm MDing a show at the Glen Gould Theatre on November 1st. They are inducting my good buddy Mark Jordan into the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame. So I'll be leading a band there, and we're going to be inducting Mark and some other people also. Plus, my biggest recording project right now is a project I have going with a fabulous singer by the name of Robin Black. And if you go to Spotify or YouTube or Apple Music, wherever you get your music, if you search either Robin Black, Robin with a Y, or my name, the project will come up. We've got 11 singles out there, and our first album is going to be out on October the 22nd. So keep an eye out for that. And for those fans of Tower Power, my Oakland Stroke Band is doing a show at the Redwood Theatre at Greenwood and Gerrard in Toronto on December the 9th. And if you just go to the redwoodtheatre.com, you can get tickets for that. And if you do watch any of my videos on YouTube, which I have a lot with Oakland Stroke and Robin and myself and a whole bunch, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And come and follow me on Facebook. It's Lou Pomanti Music. And that's it for the self-promotion.
Yes, I'll be sure to leave the links to your socials and all that in the description of the interview for you. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this special interview with Lou Pomanti. See you all next time.
Thank you.